Hi everyone, my name is Isaac George. I'm in the Department of Surgery. I wanted to tell you a little bit about my experience with COVID. In mid-March, I got sick and I recovered. And I was going to tell you a little bit about some of the personal aspects to my recovery and how it's affected what I do at work. So I'll start off by telling you on Sunday evening, and again in mid-March, I started to not feel well. I had a mild cough. The next day on Monday, I felt worse. I started to have some low-grade fevers, and that night I actually ended up sleeping on the couch. Tuesday morning, I definitely knew something was wrong. I had fevers. They were up to 101. I had severe myalgias. I was tired, and I really just didn't want to move around. I didn't really have a cough, but I had headaches, and I don't really get headaches, and they were reasonable headaches, pretty severe. So I knew something was wrong. I was lucky enough to get tested at a local facility just across the street from my apartment, and I actually took all my things and I left our apartment. I left my family, and I was lucky enough to have an apartment available, our in-laws' apartment, and they were not there. And so I was able to go to my in-laws' apartment and I stayed there. So over the next 3 to 4 days, I was waiting for the test to come back. I continued to have fevers, low grade. That was, somewhat controlled with Tylenol. I continued to have myalgias, and I just didn't want to move around. I didn't really feel like eating much. I slept a lot. I had headaches, and everything seemed to slowly get better after 3 to 4 days. I had some mild GI distress. It was a little bit of a slow recovery, but it certainly wasn't as severe as some of the cases that we're seeing in the hospital, obviously. And it was what I would consider clearly a mild case of COVID. But it did take some energy out of you, and I did lose, 5 to 7 pounds, which is a lot for me. And overall, it did get better. The test came back positive. After about a week or so, I felt significantly better, and I made the decision to come back home at that point, and wearing a mask at home and keeping isolated from my family to some extent. At that time, the recommendation was you could come back to work if you were asymptomatic and not having fevers. I spent an extra week out of work at the time. It was not that busy, and so I felt that it was reasonable to stay home. And after 2 weeks, I came back to work. Um, in terms of how this has changed what I do in the hospital, we've had a significant reduction in cardiac surgery. So it's not as if we've been busy with operating at this point. So it's been a different situation for us. I've been working in the ICU, taking care of COVID patients in our new ICUs, and that's taken up the majority of my time. And then the rest of the time, we've been working on academic projects. I felt well, and I feel totally back to normal at this point. And in terms of the energy that's come back, I've gone running before, and it's maybe not as good as it used to be, but it's close. I have used the same precautions that I've had before. Having recovered doesn't necessarily mean that you're immune. I have gotten tested and I do have antibodies, but again, I think we're still trying to figure out what kind of immunity you really have with these antibodies. And it's not clear if you can get another infection again, or the length of immunity with the antibodies. So regardless, I keep with full recommendations, and I wear all of the PPE that we need to for taking care of patients. To some extent, I think it's allowed me to have a little bit more freedom, and it's been important for me to come back to work, to give me something to do, one, as well as to ensure that maybe other providers who may be at higher risk don't necessarily need to come into the hospital. I understand that we've had a lot of people who've been really sick. Some of our colleagues have been extremely sick, and it's important for us to understand that. In terms of how bad it was, it was worse than the flu. It was probably along the lines of the worst flu that I've had, but just for 4 days, 4 to 5 days, and really after the fifth to sixth day, I got better, and so it lasted a week, and I've had the flu, which has lasted more than a week. and I've had sinus infections that have been worse. So in a scale of 1 to 10, I would say it was a 7 to 8. And so I think that's the majority of the cases that are out there. Probably 70 to 80% of the cases that are out there are similar to mine, or maybe even asymptomatic completely. I'm very, again, grateful and lucky to be in the position that I'm in.